Okay, next up we have a panel discussion on a topic that many of us who work in startups know all about, which is scaling, and specifically how as you grow, you maintain your purpose, how you balance growing while also staying the company you once were. So to talk about that, our moderator is Fatemeh, who's one of the the co-founder of Ninti and a member of SISTA's board of directors. We've got Dr. Neel Shah, who's the chief medical officer at Maven Clinic, Fatoumata Jailani, the COO at Singa, and Trisha Shetty, who is an activist and ex-model.
It's the last panel. How are you all feeling? Are you still uplifted? Yes? Okay. Great. So thank you so much. Thank you, Neel, Fatemeh, and Trisha for this panel on scaling purpose and balancing growth and impact. It's really ambitious. The entire idea of this panel is really to leave you with tools so that you feel inspired and that you take concrete actions when you go back, either as an investor or as a founder. So Neel is the Chief Medical Officer at Maven Clinic, a company I'm really inspired by. 1.5 billion valuation, serving 15 million members in women's health. It's a virtual clinic dedicated to women's health and working with employers, supporting their employees at different life stages. Fatemeh is an amazing advocate in migration, COO of Singa, dedicating her life to really rethink policies and make sure that we are of service to others when it comes to public policies in general, when it comes to migrations as well. Trisha is a lawyer, women's rights advocate, also co-leading the Paris Peace Forum. So let's start. Before we start, we are talking about purpose, so purpose is really intimate. And you feel free to do this exercise. So we need to go back to where it all started. I want you all to share with us where you were at 12, and what is one thing you took from that period in your life that you feel is still something you have right now, and that is still something that is supporting you as a driving force in your current mission. We can start with you.
Yeah. Sure. I'm a man working in women's health. So age 12, I was listening to my mom, I guess. But I grew up in a multi-generational household. So I was raised by my parents, who were straight-laced immigrants and very pragmatic, and also my grandparents, who were involved in decolonizing India. So I have a healthy respect for radical thought, I think, which is necessary in a VC-backed technology innovation role. But if you're working in healthcare, you have to make sure that you're tethered to the ground too, and so I think I got that from my mom.
Hello, everyone. My response isn't that inspiring. Actually, I wanted to be rich like Bill Gates, so I could buy my parents a house. And at the time, I didn't know who Bill Gates was, but I just knew he was rich. And when I think back to why I wanted that, I think because my parents were immigrants, and because they had lost everything, I wanted to give them a home. And gosh, that's such a charged word, right? Home. In home, you find comfort, you find people that love you, you find a place where you're comfortable. My parents spent 15 years of their lives not being comfortable. And as a result, we weren't comfortable as well. And so I think today, if I work at Singa, it's because I want to create this bigger home for people, for migrants that are coming. I want to create a welcoming society where they can realize themselves and not spend 15 years feeling uncomfortable.
I'm not co-leading the Paris piece for my players. Very small role in a big machine. I had to actually count what age is 12. I was severely depressed, had PTSD, wore black, white, gray, wanted to disappear. And I think what I have held on from that period is resilience. I had to figure out how to survive, the reason to survive as well. And the big thing that took me out of that space was my work. It saved me, my work in gender equality. But then this leads back to a conversation that we were having yesterday with Fatemeh, where everything I do is very self-serving. I needed a very strong reason to get out of bed. But what they don't tell you about depression is how darkness becomes a very comfortable safety blanket that you envelope around you, where even getting up, taking a shower, brushing your teeth is a Herculean task, and you start marinating in your own sweat, and you smell disgusting, but you can't break the cycle. What helped me break the cycle is my work, purpose, I guess, gender equality. And then there came a period where my therapist looked at me and said, I don't have an identity beyond work. So I spent my late 20s building an identity beyond work, all through the vehicle and lens of resilience.
Thank you. Wow. You almost made me teared. So let's get back to the call. I think we all have a call in life, and sometimes some are very lucky and they figure it out, at 3 years old, and others does much later in life. And I do feel like all of you, the red thread is that at some point you took a step back. You left your comfy job at Harvard, went to work in a company for profit in women's health while being an academician and a doctor. You left your job at Mazar, Fatemeh, joining a non-for-profit and being of service to migrants coming in this beautiful country. And Trisha, you're transitioning from your activism to art, which I feel is also very brave. So I would love for you all to share with us, how did that call came, the wake-up call, if we can say, and what was the process around it?
We were talking earlier about how creativity comes from living in between spaces, and also how uncomfortable it can be to live in between spaces. But it's relatively rare in life that you truly have a cinematic moment that changes your worldview, and I had one in March of 2020 when I was working as an obstetrician in my hospital. And a pregnant woman called me and was symptomatic and probably had COVID, although I'll never know, and wanted to come into my hospital. And we didn't have any beds. And the advice I was supposed to give her at the time was to try and self-isolate at home. But because of her living circumstances, she couldn't. She had little kids and she lived with her mom. And it was very clear to me in that moment that health is not produced in the four walls of my hospital. It's produced in people's homes and in their communities and in their workplaces. And I wanted to be able to work outside of my hospital in those spaces. And in this kind of a space that we're now in, the CEO of Maven Clinic took a chance on me and made a bet that an academic could have a role in a space like this, that we could maintain optimism and idealism about disruption and creating a new model of care, but we could do it in a way that was scientifically credible, with outcomes that we were going to put our fees at risk for.
I guess just to come back on the word comfortable, I don't know how comfortable Mazars was. I definitely learned a lot from that experience. It was just that I felt like I spent my whole life trying to fit into clothes that didn't necessarily fit me. And that can get really exhausting sometimes. And so the big day when I don't know if it was one big day or if it was a whole thought process, but when I decided to make that leap, I remember I had to think about it, because Mazars for me was the first time in my life that I had financial stability. I never had that before. And so, but at the same time, I knew something was really like not, I didn't feel well, you know? And I had to, it took a lot of courage to take a leap somewhere where there's no security net. And I wasn't sure, I didn't have any certainty as to what would happen. But at the same time, I knew that I had to do that because I felt like I needed to work somewhere that resonated more with who I am, that made sense a bit of my traumas and what I've seen through life. And obviously I did it and I don't regret it today, and I'm very thankful for that. And it was very important for me to prove also that like someone that never had that financial stability, that I wasn't possessed by my status, that the day that my values are not aligned with what I'm doing, that I could walk away. Okay, sure, at the time I didn't have a child, and you know that makes it much more easier. But at the same time, if I were to do it again with my child, I think I would have probably done it in a less spectacular way, but I would have found a way to stay true to my journey.
So marital rape is not a crime in my country. That means a husband can essentially get away with violating your bodily autonomy and no criminal action will be taken against him. So speaking of call, I distinctly remember the call I got from a woman who told me that every time she told her mother her husband is raping her, her mother told her, adjust, adjust. And then when she told her one day, I cannot adjust anymore, the mother looks at her and says, you think every time your father is having sex with me, it's consensual. I just don't call it what you're calling. I remember that call where the girl is telling me it's not the abuse, it's the fact that she thinks she's not strong enough to deal with the abuse, right? I remember another call of a father calling me because his 4.5-year-old child had been raped, and just seeking for justice and going to the police station, the hospital, running from pillar to wall, trying to make a system work for those who are brave enough to actually come on ground and demand for justice, right? Unfortunately, my country is in a period of deep crisis. We are having a democracy that is severely in crisis. Speaking up for human rights, especially for the rights of minorities, for Muslims, is a short way to get you death threats, at the best, get you arrested or even killed, potentially. So activists like me, here you can call me brilliant names. In my country, I'm called an anti-national terrorist. So work always saved me, but what happened is at one point I just started getting such severe death threats and rape threats and these just back to back where I couldn't go out anywhere without notifying the police. It destroyed my mental health. And sadly, we just don't talk enough about what it takes to protect those doing work within the social entrepreneurship space, right? So I had to take a step back to sort of reevaluate why am I doing this? Because if my mental health is shot, I was the most efficient person on the work front, but I was a crappy daughter. I was not a good sister. I was just, you know, I couldn't be present for myself, let alone for other people. So that's why I took a step back. You know, the reason I'm in France is because this country protects me, right? Sadly, my friend right now, Hong, she's a climate activist and she's currently detained in Vietnam. She's the 5th climate activist detained in Vietnam right now for her effective climate activism. She has a son who's worried about her safety. She does not have access to legal representation. And I have the luxury of taking a step back. She didn't choose to take a step back, and now she's detained. So I think what we must ask ourselves just real quickly is, you know, when we answer these calls and choose to do a job that requires more from us, almost in the service of society, and are giving so much of ourselves, what are people on the sidelines doing, right? Whose call are you answering? So that's something I deal with it a lot, and my transition to being an getting into artist thing was more so to protect myself, but I just wanted to take this space to tell you that if you can do one thing today, please know more about Hong, and the call I leave you with is to demand for her safety and to demand that, you know, Hong is free. Yeah.
Thank you, Trisha. And this transition to a conversation we have all the time as impact and mission-driven people. We have investors in this room. We have people from the corporate world. We have entrepreneurs, founders. And very often, we, as founders, we all came up with the same struggles. Like, it's very hard to find the right revenue model. It's very hard to make an investor take a leap and say yes when it comes to social entrepreneurship and impact, because it seems like charity in many ways. It's sometimes undervalued. So how do we redesign, when we talk about scaling purpose, is how do we redesign the space so we leave investors in this room and people from the corporate world inspired with tools that they do have a lot of things, they do have a space to take, they do have a purpose as well. And I know that, Maven have been doing a phenomenal job, and you've been also looking at a lot of public policies at Singa of things that has been working and ways for corporations and investors and entrepreneurs to take a leap on and really connect with that purpose.
The question is how to balance the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all want to be good people. I think that also, this is my way of answering the question. I think that as an academic, my role was to design social programs and try and prove that they worked. But part of what compelled me to come to the private sector, of all places, was that none of my ideas had product market fit. And it's actually so thrilling to me to be in a room like this in Paris, where people are focused on the needs of women. Because that, to me, is tremendous progress from where we were when I started my career. But something that's on my mind from our position at Maven Clinic is that the existential issue in the world today for public institutions and private institutions is a lack of trustworthiness. It feels like, I don't know if you all agree, but it feels like we're all standing on quicksand all the time. It's very hard to trust in our institutions the way we used to. And trustworthiness is not just a virtue, and I guess that's kind of my point. Like social impact or being a good person, being a good company, it's not just about virtue or morality or like slogans. It's something that you can operationalize. And a big part of how we're thinking about it, Kate and I, who's the CEO and founder of Maven Clinic, is we should get paid based on measurably making people healthier. And honestly, like sometimes we may not achieve that result, and so our margins may take a hit. But I think that everybody will still do better because more people will trust us and be willing to work with us. Because again, like I'm not a business person, I'm just a doctor. But I think that if you're willing to say, pay me if I measurably make things better for you, you're more trustworthy. So we should have more clients and we should do better. So I don't think that social impact and financial impact have to be mutually exclusive. And also, especially when we're working on social missions from the private sector, we have to be willing to prove it.
Thank you. This is a big topic.
You have 2 minutes.
I think that, at least coming from the finance world, what I see is that we have institutions that have functioned for the same way for centuries. And today we're asking them to look beyond profit. And they are looking beyond profit because at the COP26, it was 450,000 financial firms that bring together 130 trillion in assets have pledged to contribute to the just transition. Okay, so we've said it. Now, maybe it's harder to do, right? And why is it harder to do? Because, impact it requires a long-term mindset. Systemic impact, if we really want to make impact, it requires systemic impact, and that takes time. And on top of that, we have data today, but we don't have enough to be able to properly measure our impact. And when everyone's like, well, look at the numbers, what numbers are you looking at? And are those numbers based on a system that just no longer works for us anymore. So it's like, I think that the spaces that we need to create tomorrow in finance need to bring together many stakeholders to better understand, what is this business of impact? Because today, let's be honest and let's be humble, it is a far west.
Thank you. We have 1 minute, Trisha.
Okay, so we hear this often, right? What about meritocracy when you talk about gender parity? You look around at this current system, it does not at all talk about excellence, right? If you look at the current representation of those in leadership positions, I'll be damned if that's what I'm supposed to look at for leadership and epitome of excellence. I'm a huge fan of quotas. Rwanda has a 54% of women in the workforce. They have 2/3 percentage of women in parliament. Rwanda enforced quota system. From 2000 to 2015, the national income of everyone doubled in Rwanda, far succeeding many countries within the sub-Saharan Africa. UNDP studies, we have data actually, UNDP has studied countries that says countries with the least amount of gender inequality have higher gross national income per capita than countries with higher amount of gender inequality. Women invest 90% of their income back into the economy, whereas men invest a measly 35% of their income back into the economy. What sectors do women invest their money into? Women invest into healthcare, education, resilient infrastructure. Right? When you have women in leadership positions, based on a study of 194 countries done by the Center for Economic Policy Research and the World Economic Forum, the death during COVID with countries that were led by women is far lesser. Also, women were very more proactive and coordinated in their policy response. Also, when women invest back into the economy, what are the sectors they invest into? Development, reduced poverty, reducing inequality, children's health, school attendance. All of that sounds like very good to me. Beyond this, what more do I need to do to prove a case for why you need to invest in women? Women have made that case time and again. Your willful ignorance is causing you to have less money in your bank account, is causing your children to have a less brighter future. They will not get good education. They will not have access to good healthcare. The streets will not be resilient infrastructure. So again, do you want to live in an equitable planet? Do you want to live in a world that is less inequalities, where you can actually breathe the air, less deaths? All sounds like a great case. At this point, if you choose to behave like this, just pin, the game, pin the donkey, put that on your head. That's it. Why should we have to make a case to prove for why you need to invest in us? Tell me why you shouldn't.
Thank you, Trisha. So I see that we have, it's time for questions, right? Yeah, because the timer changed. So thank you so much. We are closing this panel. I hope you were as inspired and uplifted as I was, and that you are going to leave with tools and implement and learn and educate yourself to scale purpose. So any questions in the room?
Thanks. Hi, I'd like to point out that I think, I wasn't here this morning and I apologize earlier today, but I think you guys are the first panel where there is not a single white person on stage, so I'd like to underline that and highlight that and say that it's a really nice change, especially for Paris. So thank you, SISTA, for thinking about the diversity here. And I think that's also something that wasn't really addressed directly today, but the whole concept of intersectionality when we talk about diversity, maybe, and especially when we talk about feminism. And so I was wondering if maybe the panel wanted to comment on that.
Yeah. Neel, Fatemeh, Neel? Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I work at a digital health company, and I don't think a lot of people that work in digital health have a precise understanding of what it is and what it isn't. Like, an app isn't going to fix sexism or racism, right? What we're trying to do is take the devices that people carry in their pockets and turn into a portal into a human service, and untether services from some of the things that sometimes cause structural inequities. In women's health, I feel like a lot of the services that we provide are right at the intersection of gender inequity, but also racial inequity and geographic inequity, to be frank. The most vulnerable people that we serve at Maven Clinic are black women who are pregnant in the southern part of the US, whose providers probably don't share any lived experience with them, are not particularly close by, all the things. And so I think that maybe in the interest of being pithy on a panel for a very important topic, if we're talking about social impact, we should always look at it through an equity lens and its many dimensions. No group of people is a monolith, but also if some people are not getting the same level of service or are positioned to thrive as much as others, then we should be paying attention to how we deploy our resources and making sure that we're being intentional at least. So when we show our clients our outcomes, we always look at it by race, and sometimes also by geography, in order to be able to show that although we have a long way to go, to be honest, you know, we're making progress at the very least.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything?
I was just thinking that since I joined Singa, this whole concept of intersectionality has become very present in my mind, particularly because when I joined Singa, it was the first time really where I felt like all crossroads led there in a lot of ways. It was a place where people could go and express themselves. It's a place where we can have hard conversations about the different shades of discrimination that we see in our societies. And I've never worked somewhere where I could do that, and I never worked somewhere where I could fully be myself. When I joined Singa, it was just after the fall of Kabul, and I remember not feeling well during that period. And I thought to myself, God, I'm so blessed to be here because these people share my reality, whereas when I would leave, no one shared my reality. And I think that as the CEO of that organization, also being a minority and being a woman, the fact that I could come and be myself, to have those hard conversations, with my team members, to have them challenge me, like it saves us so much time because we're going into something much deeper. And that for me is, it's essential in creating inclusive spaces.
Thank you. 20 seconds.
Yeah, I'll just keep it super brief. Most of the people that are talking about race, I mean, it's not lost on me that this country does not do any race-based data and Sensex, right? So most of the activists that will talk about these really uncomfortable issues get subject to severe pushback and criticism. If you dare to talk about race and the intersectionality of caste and creed and your economic background, you're getting severe pushback. There's systematic online trolling that you are subject to. So then I go back to saying this, even if you can't talk about it, at least look at the people that are and just ensure that they feel safe. And you show up in solidarity with them and say that when you are being subject to, because discrimination is not c'est pas par hasard, quoi. There is financial incentive that goes behind holding up these systems of discrimination that profit white men inherently. So when you're challenging that, you're inherently going after people's money, right? So that's why they want to save these systems. So also make sure that the people speaking up, you're doing your bit to make sure that they're safe.
Thank you. It's good. Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed.